So good morning, this is Cedric speaking from the CERA Grenoble. So this is a presentation in the frame of the training of the Reveal project. So today I will discuss video lens-free microscopy dedicated to the imaging and analysis of adherent cell cultures, and the subtitles is from 2D to 3D, from computational to neuronal. So this presentation, it spans 10 years of work, and here below you can see all the people who have been involved into this work, both from the experimental side and the algorithm and the analysis side. So the presentation will be four parts. At first, I will introduce the principle of lens-free microscopy. I will show you what we can see, what we can quantify, what we can analyze. And in the last part, I will discuss the evolution of this microscopy towards neuronal microscopy. And this is really in the frame of this European project that we started a year ago. So lens-free microscopy, what it is first, this is a regular microscope that you can find nowadays into the lab. It's a very powerful microscope. It has evolved from the 70s, for a century ago. And at the CERA and in other labs in the world, since 10 years, we are working on this device. So it's a very minimalist microscope. Basically, we removed pretty much everything from this, but we kept the light source, the sample, obviously, the adherent cell culture, and the CMOS, the sensor. So the way it works, and it was discussed by Wojciech in his training course. It is based on a principle of recording the wave interference pattern. So it has been introduced by Denis Gabor in the 50s. Instead of recording the image of the sample, what we do record is a diffraction interference pattern. It's a wave interference pattern. So what we see is this. We do not look at the cells. We do not image the cells directly. What we do record is a diffraction pattern. So here it's a picture with mini cells, but what you see are just these diffraction patterns instead of the image of the cells. So to make a comparison, it's very much like if you throw a stone into waters, then you get driplets, so you get waves onto the surface of the waters. And what we are looking at is not the stone, but we are looking at the wavelet at the surface of the water. It's very much similar with light. You throw light on the cells, the light diffract the light, so they are making waves, and we are looking at this interference pattern of the waves. So the main idea here is that we do not look at the cells, we are looking at the diffraction patterns. And but what we want to get is this picture instead. We really want to go back to the image of the cell. So it's an algorithm. We have to decipher the algorithm that will transform this image, this diffraction pattern image, into this image that we are interested in. Here we want to look at the cells. So I will briefly explain you how we managed to get this picture. It has been a work for almost 10 years. It's mostly my colleague Lionel Hervé who is involved in this work, and it's still working on this matter. So on the left, what you see here is an image that is recorded by a lens-free microscope, and this image is this is the intensity of the light, and this is you can go back to the module of the light, and basically what you record here is the number of photons. Here you have I don't know if you see my mouse. In the object plane, there are the cells, and the sensor is 1 millimeter away from the cells. And what we do record here is this picture. It's a diffraction pattern, and basically it gives you information on the number of photons that interfere at the sensor level. We miss half of the information because the number of photons is one thing, but what we're interested in is the phase of the light. It's an angle, and if you remember the presentation by Wojciech, the light is a wave, and you can characterize the wave at every point, at every moment, with an angular value that we call the phase. And this is what we are interested in. But as you see here, we do not record anything of the phase. So for every pixel, we have a value that is related to the number of photons. But for every pixel, we miss the phase information. So that means that we have many unknowns into this problem. In a picture, there are typically 10 millions of pixels. So basically, in this problem, we have 10 million of unknowns. We want to retrieve these phase values, and there are 10 million of them. So it's quite a problem. The nice thing is that we can take the information in the sensor plane, and we can propagate it towards the surface of the cells. That means that we know the function that backpropagate the light from the plane of the sensor toward the object plane. It's a light transport function. We know this function, and that means that if we know the light in the sensor plane, we can figure out what is the light in the object plane. If we do so, we get this picture. Again, there is a module information and the phase information, and what we're interested in is the phase information, and we get this picture, and it's not nice at all. You cannot recognize the cells at all. So we move from the sensor plane towards the object plane, towards the cell plane, but still we cannot see anything yet. We put a constraint telling that there is no absorption. So basically the module in the object plane is equal to 1. So we can force the value to 1, and we can propagate the plane from the cell toward the sensor. So this is what I want to explain here, is that we can make a calculation about the light between the object plane and the sensor plane in one direction and the other. And at every iteration, we can put some constraint, like telling that there is no absorption and that the cell is only a phase object and so on. And we get this picture, which is still not very nice. We can improve the whole process if we take into account 3 different wavelengths. So we make the calculation and the acquisition at 3 different wavelengths. These are red, green, and blue. And this way we can improve the reconstruction. So here you see the phase image of the cell, provided that you have recorded the diffraction pattern at 3 different wavelengths. So this was a result that we achieved in 2016. We start in 2013. So basically, I've shown you the work of 2 PhD students already. Lionel, he has pushed this methodology, so I will not go into the details, but we put some priors into this reconstruction process to tell that the image is sparse. That means that the image is mostly blank, and at some pixels there are some information relative to the cells, and this gives you an additional priors, and we are able to make this image. And since 2018, we're able now with this algorithm to transform this diffraction pattern image into this image. At that time, 2018, it was quite a long computation. It used to take about 3 minutes. So lens-free microscopy, you do record waves, you do record the diffraction patterns, and then thanks to an algorithm, you're able to go back to the image of the cells. You will tell me if you see the videos here. So now it's a time lapse. That means that we put the microscope into the incubator, looking at the cells. You see the diffraction pattern, and then there is the algorithm that is able to record the image of the cells. One important thing here is that the microscope first it goes into the incubator, so you can monitor the cell culture every 10 minutes, let's say. And the second important point is that, as you see here, the image is quite large. Actually, it is 30 square millimeters. It is 6 by 5. You can zoom in and zoom out into this picture. That means that in one image, you are able to look at up to 20,000 of cells. Here the resolution is low because of the JPEG compression of the video, but you can see here that the resolution is better. Now again, this is the zoom out and zoom in. But you can see here in this detail that the resolution is better than in comparison with the first video. Still, the resolution is not that good if you compare to regular microscope. It's in the range of 4 to 5 micrometers. I can show you some other example. I did not tell, but you can stop me at any point, and if you want to ask any question, you can interrupt me, and I will be glad to answer the question during the talk. So over the years, we have made a lot of these experiments, and we are still in the process of improving the reconstruction of the image. And the point here is that we can call this a computational microscopy. It's different from regular light microscopy in the sense that we have replaced some optical components by algorithm. And here, basically, we have replaced the lens, which allows to form the image of the cells by an algorithm. So therefore, we speak about computational microscopy. To tell that this has been now commercialized by the company Presence, who is partner of this European project. This is the one well sensor that goes into the incubator. You put the petri dish with the cell culture on top of the CMOS sensor. Here you can see the CMOS sensor, which is 6 by 5 square millimeters, and there is a 6 well version that is running now at ENS to record the acquisition. So in this first part, I told you what we can see, and now I will tell you what we can quantify. Here in this schematic, I show you a cross-section of an adherent cell. The light goes through this cell, and the light goes just outside of the cells. And what we do record is a phase shift. So it's a difference of an angle. This is the difference of the light angle that goes through the cells and the light that go beside the cells. So we do measure every small shift of the light phase. Again, it is an angle. And we can relate this phase shift to difference of refractive index multiplied by the thickness. And this is what we do record. It's called an optical path difference. It is function of the wavelengths. Wavelength is typically 500 nanometer. The phase shift that is recorded, it's a few tenths of a degrees. It is normalized by 2p. And this value that we do record is proportional to the thickness of the cell, dz, and the refractive index of the cells. So that means that we do record a value which is given in nanometers. It is proportional to a refractive index and the thickness. So we do know the multiplication of the refractive index by the thickness of the cell at every point. But we do not know the refractive index, and we do not know the thickness at every point of the cell. Still, we know at every point of the cell this optical path difference, and it's quite interesting because if you sum up this value over the surface area, and then if you divide by this factor alpha, which is about 0.18 cubic micrometer per picogram, then you can measure the cell dry mass of the cell. For information, this coefficient factor, it has been introduced in the 50s. It relates the refractive index of the cell when the cell is into water, and it gives you a relation between this refractive index and the dry mass of the cell, which is the mass mostly of the proteins that are within the cell. But then we do not weight the water which is within the cell. So this is the so-called dry mass. We take this coefficient for granted, or even so, it has never been recalculated from experimental data since 50 years now. So this is actually one thing that we could do in the REVEL project. We have compared the results obtained by means of lens-free microscopy with other means of microscope, and we have made a comparison over tens of cells, telling that so far so good. The measurements that we achieve are comparable to that with other more complicated microscope. So we can measure the dry mass of the cell. We can do cell tracking on a very large scale. So this video shows you the full screen 30 square millimeters, and every dot, every color corresponds to a single cell. And we can follow every single cell in time over the course of the adherent cell culture. And then we can go to a single cell that we can follow a single cell here. So we are looking at the cell here in the middle of this video. And the cell matrix that we can compute over time is the cell surface area. I told you about the cell dry mass. So you see here the dry mass over hours, and every sharp edges corresponds here to cell division. We can measure the speed of the cells, micrometer per minute. About the range is slower than 1 micron per minute typically. We can estimate the thickness of the cell. So I told you that we cannot measure the thickness, but if we make an hypothesis on the refractive index, it gives you an estimate of the thickness. So usually we take 0.02 for the refractive index difference.
Cedric, so tell me why, excuse me, why this plot for thickness is so strange. It has these periodic peaks. So how do you interpret this?
So what you see here, you follow single cells over time, and then it divides every 16 hours about. So every 16 hours, the cell is getting round to divide. So during the mitotic process, there is cell rounding. That means that at that point, the cell is spherical and the thickness is about 15 to 20 micrometers. And this is an estimate. Is it okay, Margosetta?
Yeah, it's a bit strange that it is such high peak, but yeah, okay.
At this point, it could be that our reconstruction is wrong. We suspect that when the cell is mitotic, when we get a spherical cell, then the quantification is no longer working. So it's a point of discussion here. It could be the value could be.
Because I cannot see the correlation between sphericity and thickness.
Because yeah, the sphericity maybe it's yeah, I agree. Might be wrong on this calculation. So this is something to check out. I agree with you completely, Margosetta.
Okay, thank you.
So this was to tell that we have this large field of view with thousands of cells that we can make single cell measurements, and then we can compile all these measurements over the population. And then we get this graph that characterize one experiment. So you see the number of cells as function of time. We can compute the cell cycle duration, that is the length in time between the start and the end of a cell cycle. So you see here it's typically 20 hours. The nice thing is that with one experiment, we can measure, in this case, 16,000 of such a cell cycle duration. We can measure the dry mass at the beginning of the cell cycle, at the end of the cell cycle, the growth rate, we can compute cell area, etc. So here the things to what is important here is in a single experiment, which lasts about 3 days here, we end up with more than 3 million of cell measurements, and we end up with more than 16,000 cell cycle measurements. So this is to give you the one advantage of these methodologies, that you can compile a very large amount of data, and you will see that it's important later on for introducing deep learning analysis. You need a lot of data. So here you have a lot of data in just one experiment. I want to show you one interesting case study that we have done in 2016. It was to look at mesenchymal stem cells, and it was to monitor the effect of the SC cell death. So it's a drug that we introduced into the experiment at some point to kill the cells. And I want to show you what we measure when the cells are dying. So it was in 2016, so at that time the reconstruction was not that good, but still we could measure a lot of things in this time lapse. So you see here the cells, they are living. Then at this point, about this point, we introduced the drugs to kill the cell, and then all the cells they do die at some point. So we can measure the many cell metrics. The drugs was introduced at 0 time, and we can measure the speed of the cells, and you can see that there is a decrease of speed after 16 hours after the drug introduction. We have measured the orientation of the cells, and you can see that the cells are losing the orientation about 30 hours after the drug introduction. Meaning that at first sight, the orientation is quite correlated from one cell to another. Then at some point, you lose this correlation, and you can measure that. You can measure the shape difference. That means the cells, they change in shape, and you can see that it occurs at 28 hours. And there is also a connectivity graph, which connect the cells one another, and you can analyze this connectivity graph, and again you can measure at what time you see the effect. And in the end, the regular metric that is monitored to look at cell death is the adhesion, and you can also measure the adhesion loss. And you see that here it occurs 38 hours. So usually the cell death is measured with this matrix that is occurred here at 38 hours. But if you measure with all the metrics that I've shown you, you can make this interesting time frame. And you see that after the drug introduction, first the cells, they lose motility, and then they change their shape. Then they lose a spatial order, and in the end, they detach from the surface. So you have a nice time frame of the cell death here. Also, one nice result of this case study was that you can detect all the cell death looking at the detachments. So in this scatter plot, you see all the living cells here, and then over time they go to dead cells. This population of dead cells, but you can find out the cells who do not detach and they are still living, even so you introduce the drugs. And even so, this is more than 30 hours after the drug introduction. You can look at the very small population of drug resistance cells. And it's because you have quite large statistics of thousands of cells. You can dig into the 1% of drug resistant cells here. So I've shown you some measurements we can do with a Lent3 microscope. I will show you what we have observed with this microscope looking at 3D cell culture. So with this Lent3 microscope, you cannot make any 3D reconstruction. Still, you can put the 3D cell culture on top of the CMOS sensor, and you can have a kind of a plane view, top view of the 3D cell. And this is what we get. So this is interesting to look at. This was a 3D cell culture of a UV cell. This is grown into matrigel, and you can see that now you have a completely different movies here. What you see here is the organization or self-assembling of the UV cell into a network structure. And this is because now you grow the cells into a matrigel. So before that, I've shown you adjuvant cell culture. These were cells at the bottom of the petri dish. Now you have cells into a matrigel, into a 3D matrigel. And here what you see is the way they do assemble all together. This was one experiment. This is another experiment, a similar experiment, where you see all these thousands of cells who do assemble into a nice network. And here you have a square here that is formed by cells. I've shown you another funny experiment here. So this is prostatic cells that are grown into matrigel. And the funny things here is that you get a kind of an explosion here. So if you see my mouse in the middle, you have a cluster of cells. You cannot figure out how many cells are within these clusters. But then at some point, for some reason, it explodes. And here you see all the cells that are escaping these clusters and that go towards other clusters. And then the other clusters, they also kind of explode, and you see all the cells that are now into this matrigel. That was a nice experiment, a nice phenomenon to look at. That's another example. These are again prostatic cells. Again, it's the top view. The color here is meaningless. This is the result of the reconstruction, but we know that the reconstruction, when these are 3D objects, is not functioning at all. Still, it gives you some values. So we gave a color code to the pixel, but it's meaningless. And the nice thing with the large field of view is that you can look at a lot of different phenomena. You can see here that there are cells going from one cluster to another. You can see that there are some branches that are fabricated by means of cells migration from one cluster to another. So thanks to the large field of view, you can next make this is nice to see. You see a single cell here escaping these clusters. It is moving toward another clusters. It is followed by many other cells, and then at some point, this collective cell migration, they are forming branches, cellular branches that connect all the cell cluster all together. In this second example, you see one cell escaping the cluster. It will not go to the closest clusters. It will make it will go around this cluster to reach another cluster, and then it's going back, kind of going back home. So these are all the phenomena that you can see looking at 3D cell culture that are completely different than a regular adjuvant cell at the bottom of a petri dish, what I've shown you before. So these are the motivated us to build a 3D lens-free microscope. So this was a thesis work by...
Cedric, before
yes?
you go to 3D microscope, can you tell me what is the limitation for resolution in lensless microscope? Is it just the depends on the sampling and wavelength, for example, or what is the formula?
Yeah, the main limitation is the pixel width. So the pixel width is 1.7 micron.
So it's just sampling, nothing else?
No, and then you have also the reconstruction algorithm, whether it is accurate or not. It depends also on the wavelengths. But basically, the rule is that if you have a pixel which is 1.7 micron, what we achieved so far is a resolution that is twice larger than that. So that means that we are in the resolution of 3 to 4 micron.
Yeah, because usually it is somehow connected with the source size, the distance, and the parameters for propagation. So
yeah.
How we do you have the formula for this?
No, we don't have the formula. We have the experimentation for that. So we the source, it is obtained with a pinhole of 15 micron, 50 micron. The cells are about 1 millimeter away from the CMOS sensor, and then the CMOS sensor, it has pixels of 1.7 micrometers.
Cedric,
yes.
Lionel says that we have a formula for that.
Yeah, you're right. We must have a formula for that.
He wrote, I think, in the chat.
Yeah, but it was not straying to my mind. But altogether, so far we reached, and I told before that the resolution is the limitation of this microscope. It's in the range of 3 to 5 micrometers. But on the opposite, the advantage of this microscope is the very large field of view of 30 square millimeters. And here, when we look at the 3D cell culture, the resolution is even worse. But the resolution is good enough to see single cells, but you cannot look at any more details than just the position of the cells, basically. But again, the nice thing is that you can look at a very large field of view, so you can look at a lot of cell clusters, and then you can look at a lot of different phenomena that occurs during the time frame of the experiment. Did I answer your question, Margosata? Provided Lionel wrote down the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I said yes. Thank you very much for explanation and this additional in chat.
And then in 2018, in the thesis work by Anthony Berde, we were motivated to perform 3D reconstruction and then to make time-lapse videos of this 3D cell culture. So we built this, Anthony built this tomographic setup. So what you see is that the CMOS sensor is rotating together with the illumination, meaning that we do not move the sample. That was the choice at that time. So sample was fixed, and then the CMOS and the illumination was rotating all around. To show you that we made some 3D. This is a mosquito wing from Grenoble that has been reconstructed at first, and then we were able to reconstruct a 3D cell culture. So here the volume is about 5 cubic millimeters.
But are both moving source and the detector, or just source?
No, the illumination source and the detectors are moving together.
Okay.
that was a choice at that time to maximize the reconstructed volume, and we changed our position with respect to this design choice. In the reveal project, now it's different, as you know.
But then you had to correlate the somehow coordinates of the object.
Yes, there is an alignment step, which is a pre-processing step before doing any reconstruction. First, you have to realign all the data.
Yeah, because you have to get them into common coordinate system.
Yeah, exactly. So there is an additional step that you have to implement here. So we were able to reconstruct in 3D cell culture. These are prostatic cells, and you see clusters that are around 200 micron in diameter. This is an alginate tube that is covered with monolayers of cells. So that was done in collaboration with the University of Geneva. And the whole thing is that, again, this microscope can go into the incubator, and then you can record in 3D, the 3D plus time. So here the color is giving you the indication about the Z information. Basically, what we managed to record is this kind of 3D plus time movies of 3D cell culture. Again, the resolution is coarse. It's in the order of 5 to 10 micron in the X and Y plane, and it's worse in the Z plane. It's more like 10 to 20. I don't remember exactly, but in the Z direction, the resolution is about 30 to 50 micron, 50 micrometer. So the resolution is not good, but still interesting is that you can look at many phenomena. For instance, you can see here a cluster of cells, which is kind of eating up all the cells in the surrounding. You can look at merging of 3D cellular structures. And you see that the cluster is pushing on the matrix. You can see some traction force indirectly. Here it's a big eater. This cluster is kind of eating up all the cells in his surrounding. So when we noticed that we could see indirectly some traction on the matrix, on the matrigel, what we did is that we put beads everywhere in the thickness of the matrigel, try to see how the matrigel is deformed by the 3D cell culture. And you can see at the bottom left that here there's a lot of interaction, and actually this is pushing cells 1 millimeter away. So we could see long ranges traction forms. And we try to kind of record them thanks to the beads in the matrigel, but that was the end of the thesis work, and we stopped at that point. So this was to show you some 3D cell culture. In the remaining time, and I will take 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the last developments, which start 3 years ago, and this is the introduction of deep learning into this framework of lens-free microscopy, into this framework of computational microscopy. So the deep learning, it shows up around 2010 or maybe 2015, let's say, in the field of microscopy. And we start 3 years ago, and we start to improve first the holographic reconstruction thanks to neural networks. So on the left, it's a time lapse of neural cells network, so a real biological neural network. And we had some difficulties to reconstruct these cells because the thickness of the cell is quite large in the case of neuron cells, and there are a lot of artifacts. And we managed to improve the reconstruction process thanks to neural networks. So basically here we applied a neural network to a neural networks to get these pictures. And you see that thanks to deep learning, we can really improve the image reconstruction. That's one thing. And then we can apply neural network to do cell detection. This something I've already shown you in previous meeting. So on the left, you have the image of the cells, and then you can use a neural network to put a dot at every cell position. So this is a very simple way to detect the cell in a very efficient manner. It's much more powerful and robust than any conventional algorithm. You can do cell segmentation with a neural network. One nice thing is that you can do quantification in a straightforward manner. That means that if you combine the result of a cell segmentation and the result of cell detection into another neural network, it will point every single cells with the dots here, but then it will give a value to these dots. And the larger the value, the larger the dry mass, for instance. So we have a neural network that converts this image into a quantitative representation where every cell is represented by a dot, and the value of the dot is giving the cell dry mass of the cell. So that means that in a regular algorithm, you have to detect the cell, make the segmentation, sum up the value, and you end up with the dry mass. Here it's straightforward. The neural network is giving you directly the dry mass of the cell. And this is another one which is giving you the speed of the cells. So these are the results of the neural network, the direction map, and also this was a work done by Dorothy Kramer, a colleague of us, a postdoc last year, and she could make easily the cell division detection. Sometime quite in advance from the division itself. So you can build a network of network, and this will allow you to compute altogether the matrix at the single cell level. So that means that basically we have replaced all the standard conventional algorithms by means of neural networks, by means of a network of networks. The last one that's been built, it's a thesis work by Romain Bailly at the CEA, is a network which is making self-fed predictions. So it can predict in time, for instance, the dry mass of the cells 10 hours in advance. So what you see here is the time prediction in orange compared to the orange is the measurement, and the network is predicting in green here, the dry mass. And then in the Reveal project, we also recently computed the cell tracking. So this is an example of what is now done in the Reveal project. You can process everything thanks to neural networks in a very fast and efficient manner. These are cells that have been recorded at the ANS by the lab of Kiran. And now the neural network, it can follow every single cell and can predict what will be in the next frame. It can make the cell segmentation, the measurement of the cell dry mass. And a new network that we are working on is to look at the cell interaction. So how do the cells touch one another? And in this plot, you can see when the cells interact together, and again, this is done with a neural network. And I want to finish with the last development, which is not done yet. It's envisioned. This will be the following: is to take all this data, to take all this representation. So I've shown you that you have now a quantitative representation. You can shift from the image of the cells toward this representation, where every dot, every matrix is a quantitative representation of the cells. This is all done by a neural network, and we call this a quantitative representation. So let's say we are not longer interested in the image of the cells, but only to the values. And the next thing is to see how these values they interact with one another. So you want to compute a graph of these values, and you want to study this graph. So the point here is that we want to move from the image of the cell towards a quantitative representation of the cells. And then ultimately, we want to have a quantitative network representation of the cells. And we want to do this because we want to train, let's say, a meta neural network or an ultimate neural network. It will be a graph neural network, and it will allow you to predict from one frame to another. It's a graph neural network where every single cell will be, where every node of the graph will correspond to the cell, and the node embedding will correspond to the cell values. And the idea is to compute a graph network that will be able to predict the next frame. So at the input, you have the graph network of the cells at time t, and you want to predict the graph network at time t+1. And to do so, it has to compute some laws, some rules that define the interaction between the cells. And this is what we want to ultimately to reach with this work. So I think I will end up here to get some question. I've shown you what is lens-free microscopy, how it has evolved over 10 years. So I've shown you the principle. You have only one light, one sensor, and the sample, and this is it. To see anything, you need an algorithm. So it has been developed for 10 years now. It is quantitative, but still it has to be. It's still a matter of development. We are not fully sure that it is quantitative. So this will be further. We will work on this in the frame of the real-world projects. But we can quantify the speed, the surface area, and ultimately we want to quantify the interaction between the cells, not only the cells as a single object, but how do they interact one another. That's what we are looking forward. And this will be achieved in the frame of neuronal microscopy, where we do replace the algorithm with neural network. So to sum up, we have replaced lens by algorithm, and now we replace the algorithm with a neural network. This is the takeaway message. So I would like to thank all the people who have been involved into this work. As I told, we have made quite some experiments at the Institut Curie and INS Lyon, who has supported this work. Also at the CEA, all the 3D cell culture, mostly they have been done at the CEA in the group by Xavier Gidrol with protastic cells. And I will end the presentation here, and I will be happy to take some further questions if there are any. Thank you.